Hi, my name is Dr. Scott Young, and today we're going to talk about Revelations After the Red Pill. It's a book that I'm writing, and what we're going to focus on is the banking industry before and afterward. Coming right up. Okay, so if you watched my last one, so some people ask me questions, they watch one and they don't think it's part of the series. It is. Go back and look at that. Okay, so on one side of this issue, we have a plastic-based economy. Now, in the plastic-based economy, debt is king. How do you say that? Meaning, debt is how this whole thing works. It's because it's based upon the fiat currency that actually builds in debt. And because it builds in debt, it lives its whole life inside of that debt point, okay? And so it's always in the debt area. And yet, if you utilize debt for your benefit, so for instance, a business goes to a bank and they borrow $100 million, making up a big number, okay? And they have a risky venture, okay? The risk issue that happens, we call risk averse, what their risk averse level is. What occurs here is that they're saying, okay, we're going to take that $100 million and we're going to do X, Y, Z, and we're going to make it make $120 million. Now, the bank is going to loan, excuse me, the bank's going to loan to someone who's going to be able to make a profit, an ability to do it, because they're going to get their money back. Now, it's a little different when we talk about home loans, where they can actually take that asset and resell it. That's why there's different types of risk issues that happen in credit. Okay, asset-backed credit issues like a car or a house, you just want to make sure the person has the cash ability, their income level and their credit level, like they haven't defaulted on everything. If they haven't, then you're probably going to give them the loan, which is kind of silly in that way. Doesn't mean that they can really afford it, because you're not really looking at the whole system. Now, when we're talking about a business that's getting money from the bank, they're going to look at it much more deeply, and they're going to check the risk ability. They're looking at the balance sheets and all this kind of ability so that they can make money, because they want to make money back on this amount, okay? Now, if you don't build in enough abilities to pay back this loan with the interest, then you're still underneath on that. Does that make sense? But a lot of them come back, and we never hear about this, and that loan, when they have to sell it or basically drop out the asset, they only get $80 million on that particular thing. Not 80 bucks, 80 million. And so that is a negative investment, but the bank says, well, if you can at least afford the loan, they might do it, but they're probably not going to give you a loan again. So this is part of the debt economy, and we all live in it, and some people are really smart and they have ability to work within the system, okay? That system's dying. It's because the debt is teetering. I mean, it's teetering, it's falling off a cliff so that you can't recover from that. I mean, when the debt gets so high, and I'm talking about the Federal Reserve's debt, and they don't have the money to pay for it. The people of the world, they go, I don't have the money to pay for it either. Then you have this issue, okay? And we're there. We're there in late 2021. And by the way, the world's already known this stuff. The whole point of their new economy in the cabal's new economy in in this plastic economy is they're going to take the fiat to another fiat currency and called the Great Reset. And the Great Reset brings you to communism. And the white hats are saying, guys, I'm just showing you what it would look like if you lived this way. That's why you got the fake administration and all this crazy stuff going on. Because they're trying to show you this, and this is what it would mean to live that way. Remember, who's lying to you? If you find that they're lying, you say, I don't want to listen to that anymore. Stop listening to those people that support the system, okay? Now, when we move into a cash-based economy, you might even call it asset-backed, but I would like to use called a grace economy. What happens in that system is that you first start with a grace situation because you've got to translate from here to here. See, if you take the debt that was fake and all this other stuff, you can't do anything about it. See, that's what the Great Reset wants to do. Oops, sorry, I can't even write there. The Great Reset's whole goal, the whole goal is to go from one fiat to another fiat. And they're going to they're going to write off some of the debt point, okay? But they're going to take some of that basic debt point and go, well, you don't have to pay all of that, but maybe you only have to pay 80 million of that number, okay? And so they're going to write off some levels of the debt. And by the way, when you go through bankruptcy, they write off some of the debts. And so you go, yay, hallelujah. But there's always caveats, okay? You can't go back into the debt system inside of a bankruptcy. See, that's why we don't want to live inside of a bankruptcy system in here again. All the historical things you don't know about are bankruptcy after bankruptcy after bankruptcy. 1933 was a type of bankruptcy when they stole the gold. 1971-ish was a time frame that we went off of the gold standard. It's not silver standard, the gold standard that Nixon pulled us off of, that the other countries wanted to get gold back for their for their dollars, for the petrodollars. And when they said, hey, we can't do this anymore, can't afford it, that's when they shut off all the money. I mean, it's the oil. And then we move again into 2000, and it was already going this way. If you invested money in 2000, you watched your money dwindle until you hit 9/11. Was another bankruptcy event. And we've always known this is coming in 2020. Now, it's taken time to fix the system. But when we move in to the grace economy, as we talked about before, cash is king, okay? Because you first have to move in to a debt jubilee. Boy, I can't spell today. So anyway, that's what happens in here. Now, here's what I want to share with you, and you watch the other video and you'll get the rest of this. Okay, so let me back up here for a second. When you have banking with these two ideas, we're going to kind of move over here and just explain some of the banking point that happens. So banks, when they do this, when the U.S. Mint sends out their money, sorry, I'm coughing, it's an esophageal issue, okay? And they send out their money, and it's all based upon the debt and more debt every single year. What happens is the bank will actually, and as you're going farther in debt, they know that they have to do this thing called inflation. Okay, so it means that your money, the value of your money is going down and prices go up. And we've all accepted, that's just how it is. We're looking toward hyperinflation. Calm down, that system is dying, okay? But what the bank does, because they're the part of they're the one that drives this whole ship. So what they do is they only have to keep 10% of their assets or cash on hand. And they're going to loan out 90% of everything they have into the system. And that's what they do. And that's why we have to have like FDIC as backing them up. And so these are the backups. So there's this insurance plan to do that. Now, by the way, if you go back and look at 2008 crisis points, like too big to fail, all these really interesting things, there's no FDI. I mean, there's FDI insurance that only takes about $250,000. Excuse me. But what happens if you have more money than that? I mean, and we're talking about businesses, big businesses. When they don't have enough money, there's nothing that covers them. And so what these people do is that they go back into the Federal Reserve and get more money to back them up. So they do this, they're doing this to you as just a favor, but they could care less, because they're just trying to like cover the basic people here. So this whole thing is just a cyclical issue, and it has to die. And they've known it for a long time. It has to die, okay? But when banks move into this economy, the debts have to go away. They have to die. And you're going, well, how can a bank afford the debts? Because they're going to get paid off for those debts, okay? They're going to have an asset-backed point. I've heard about this for a very long time frame, that there was as much as anywhere from 83 to 127 trillion dollars just to cover the debts that was coming from the white hats. This is to kill off those debts. Even they have to wipe those debts out. So what happens to them is that you owe for your house, $300,000 for your house, right? And this is what the asset is of your house. You put 20% down, so that's $60,000. So you have $240,000 loan that you're paying every single month, right? Maybe that's what, $1,800, depends on, the number that you actually have. Now, with that house and that asset that occurs here, they pay it off. And what happens if the bank or someone pays off your debt? Who keeps it? Let me show you. You keep it. The bank has no right to it anymore. When I paid off my son's car, okay, the very first time I really had done this, I've done it with other things, but I'll give you an example. When a car payment comes in and you get it through the bank, it'll say on the title, it says like Bank of America and Scott, right? But then when you pay off your debt, or someone walks in and writes a check, let's say, and that happens, the title comes back to you and it only has your name on it, okay? It freaked me out because we were trying to sell my son's car and we didn't have the title. I don't know what we did with this. We had to go call up Bank of America. That's why I'm using that name. Bank of America. I'm like, dude, can you find the title? She goes, oh yeah, we got it. It was 3 years ago you did this. Yeah. And then she had to send it to me. They're really kind of cool about that. But again, I own that asset because it's paid off. So what happens is you're going to see these assets all get paid off. And that's because you have to move out of this debt system that's in here. And so the banks are suddenly going to be flush in their balance sheet. They're going to instantly go, we don't have any money coming in. It's good to them in some ways because they don't have this, they don't have to deal with this. They've got money that they've had paid off their debts. So if a bank, for instance, had $150 million in their balance sheet for the payments, they're going to get a check for $150 million. Now that sounds like crazy, but that's what I think is actually occurring in the background. But that's their beginning point. And when they move in, cash is king, economy, When you have an asset-backed system, first you have to grace that thing into it, and then you move into the cash as king. Guess what they can't do? They used to be able to do this. They would do a couple different things. Let me write it down here below. First off, they loan, oh, I already wrote that. They loan 90% out. So if they had $150 million, you know, they're loaning out, you know, way more than that. You know, closer up closer to $1 billion or $1.2 billion of that money, and they just have $150 million on hand. So they love that. They think, and it makes them worth more than they ever really were because they never had that. Okay, that's one area that occurs. The second part that they do is that they have the fractional interest. In fractional-based interest, here's what happens. When you have this house loan, $300,000, you put 20% down, $160,000, $1,800, and you look at the interest on it. It's front-loaded interest. Okay? It's front-loaded, so you're paying way more in interest than you're ever paying a payment. So you could be paying payments for $1,800. And I had to have this kid, my son lives with him, and he was trying to explain this to him. He's never owned a house. He's 23 years old. And I'm like, dude, you have to understand, even after a year, you'll not have paid down much of your house. He's like, how's that work? It's wrong. And I'm like, well, it is wrong, but it is part of the debt economy. Okay? This is the sickness, and this is one of the reasons how the White Hats and Donald Trump have actually hijacked them, because that is not constitutional. Okay? We can find that in the 10th section of the Constitution. You can also find that in 14th Amendment and the 3rd and the 4th section. It goes in several areas, and there's so many little caveats that explain how this kind of interest system that they do, this fractional ability for the loaning, that they have to only keep a small amount on hand, and secondly, that they charge this excessive interest rate. When they move into this kind of thing, and you're going to have to see some of these banks die. Now, you're not going to lose your money. It's okay. You're going to have the money over there. You're going to want to take your money out. And I've been telling people all the time, move your money into the small credit unions, the small banks, the local banks, okay? You don't need to have the big bank. With our ability to kind of log into our bank, we can log into our bank in anywhere in the world, okay? You don't need to have, bank location because you're in, you move to Portland or whatever, and you need a Bank of America. No, you can actually do this stuff very digitally anymore. Okay. So when they move in and they have to have assets, their assets, which is the cash, are going to have to equal what they have on hand. Okay? They're going to have to, they cannot go off and start loaning a ton of money. They're going to have to make money off of that. And they're going to have cash on hand so that we don't have any more runs on the bank. See, that's the other way that they get this. So this will kill the idea of the run on the bank. It's really it's ingenious when you look at this. And the second part of this is that they're still going to, I believe that there still will be loans that bank does, because we have to have this. There are people who don't have any money out there, and we'll talk a little bit about the difference of a person, who is heavily debted and a person who lives really nicely in cash, like my father-in-law, for instance. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a minute, or we'll talk about it in another video. But what happens when you have cash is king and they have to live on the assets that you have, it doesn't mean that you can't go spend and do some investments and loans, because there are people out there that don't have have a massive amount of debt. They get their debt paid off, but they have no money, they have no cash. And they still have to buy things like, cars, and homes and whatever, okay? Now, what happens to those people? They're still going to get loans through the banks. But what you're going to find is simple interest loans. And they're going to have a way that they can pay it off. I always think about episodes of MASH. In episodes of MASH, and I do not remember the one, Henry Morgan, the colonel, he has this party because he gets from his wife in Missouri, he's in Korea, and she gives him the title of the house because they have this big party because he's paid off his house. And it was the big thing that they would do, and they would send the note and you would burn the bank statement because you now owned the asset. You got to watch the episode. I don't remember which one it was, but you can go watch your own episodes on this. It's really kind of cool when you see this, okay? And what they're talking about is that they will own it. Now, I still think that there is a way to do it, and it's called simple interest. Now, there's another possibility that they could do, and they could do just an amount, like a fee, that they do. They could do either one of these systems or a little bit of both, okay? So this is just a fee. And by the way, the PPP loans, this is the fascinating thing that happened. The PPP loans were the initialization of NESARA. And if you don't understand that, go back and watch my other videos. But in the PPP loans, do you know that when the banks got the money, see, I had to fill out the information through the through the bank, who had to file it with the Treasury Department, who was getting their money from the Fed, so it put the Fed underneath the Treasury Department and killed the Fed initially, in this thing. It's fascinating how it did it. And Trump did all this thing. Now, what he did is that the money would come to me, so I'm the business, and it's a payroll protection plan, PPP, and the banks would get a fee because they were not going to have to, the person was never going to pay the loan back in interest. Now, there are some people that are stupid enough, and I'm sorry to be rude here, but they're stupid enough to not fill it out correctly. I'm like going, you can fill this out, and it's like a 2-page form. I had my accountant do it because I didn't want to mess it up. I just didn't want to screw it up there. But the banks were making a lot of money just because there was a fee. And who paid the fee? The Fed. Okay? Now, in the new system, I think that the fees will actually come. You'll pay that fee. You'll be happy to pay the fee, but it's a lot easier to pay. And as we talk about in my other videos where we talk about the value of money, when you increase the value of the money, the prices go down. Because in the opposite end, when you decrease the value of money in inflation, prices go up. But when you have an asset-backed economy, prices will drop, and they'll drop dramatically. Now, don't believe all the stuff where they talk about it's going to go back to 1950 pricing. First off, if you go look at a car in the 1950s, however many things you want, if there's 20 different items in that car, you go look at a new car now and there's 100 different items in that car. There's so much more technology. It's not exactly the same way, but you're going to see some of that kind of ratio points, okay, in essence, okay? Cars are still going to be much more than you think they are, but they're going to be at a much lower rate, okay? Whether if it's a $40,000 car, it might be $20,000. You're like, yeah, I can do that. I can afford that, or whatever that might be. But it's all going to be letting the economy, the people drive this whole thing. And banks are still going to make money. They're still going to have a good system, but they're going to do it in a much more upfront kind of way. Instead of the debt, the fakery that happens over here, you're going to see you can look at the assets and they will show you all their banking stuff. to show you their assets. And you're going, yeah, but banks do that now. No, they really don't. They don't show you all the things that they're doing because they're all based upon, and they're living in the system of the loaning out of 90% of their cash on hand, and they have FDIC insurance, and they have fractional interest in all these different ways, and it's built upon the debt economy that has an inflation point. All this stuff is sick, and you gotta kill it. And so when that thing happens, so to wrap this up, the debts will get paid off because it's already been given long ago, a long time ago. We believe that it was given around 2008. And Obama and a whole bunch of other people locked it up in the Hague court. Fascinating. But when that thing comes back and pays off all your loans, you own it. You will own that asset all the way through. They will be flush with cash and working on a cash-based system because cash is king. So they will work on the assets in hand. And so you don't, because they have assets in hand, it'll kill the run on the banks that was happening in 1907 that precipitated the Fed. And secondly, they will have the ability to do loans because it'll either be a fee-based point, simple interest, whatever the thing is. And they'll have their own way of doing this. And you'll know that up front because that's the other caveat that we're able to kill these guys. In NESARA agreements, one of the things that they're going is constitutionally. In the 14th Amendment and the 4th section, it's a little bit kind of crazy, but what it's talking about is contracts. So if I give money to a guy and we sign a contract together, but I don't tell him all the little features that are in this contract. Here's what the Constitution actually says. If I, as the contractor, okay, I'm going to give the money to the contractee, the person getting the money, but I don't tell you everything about it. And this is actually constitutional. That's why it's a legal point. Who has to pay off the whole amount? The guy over here. If you didn't reveal everything to it, the contract is null and void. And when it's null and void, he has to eat it in totality. And that's the amazing thing. Inside of all of this, if you've ever seen a home loan, if you've ever seen some of these things, and you look at, and they're literally hundreds of pages long, and then they added all these little privacy protection stuff, and it makes me crazy because they don't actually protect you anymore. If we really had privacy protection and HIPAA protection, we would have less and less spam calls. But I get more spam calls than I've ever gotten in my life. I mean, we would have less spam email, less spam of every kind of thing. And yet we get more and more of it, right? It's because they're not trying to protect you from privacy. They were trying to put more caveats on here to hide it. And we're catching them because we are a constitutional republic. We are a republic, and they're going to have to operate in this kind of mechanism. The ones that can't operate in that, they will actually go away. So what we talked about here is the banking setup of this plastic versus cash asset economy point. Now, I will talk to you next time a little bit about what the difference between a person who's living in the plastic economy and moving into the NESARA era versus the person who has already got the cash. And we'll talk a little bit about that approach. Thanks so much.